BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Today we're going back to 2007 to talk about a case that I had wanted to mention for a while. Last year on the channel, we mentioned the murder of Steve McNair as well as Fred Lane, who played for the Carolina Panthers. And another one that I had been meaning to get to was the death of Sean Taylor. Sean Taylor, of course, played safety for the Washington Redskins, as well as having an amazing high school and college career. And when you watch his highlights, you could just see he was a genuine football talent. And a lot of it was hard work as well. But that's just what I think a lot of people really think about with Sean Taylor. Now, I wasn't completely involved in the NFL in 2007. I was kind of halfway in, halfway out, wasn't paying attention too much. And I didn't completely comprehend the gravity of all the events that were taking place and just how his death affected so many players. But, you know, in West Virginia, we're even somewhat close to Washington, D.C., a lot of Washington Redskins fans here. And, I mean, after the 2007-8 season, you started seeing 21 just everywhere on all of the Redskins merchandise, as well as on the players' helmets. They would put the little 21 in the back. But yes, in 2007, Sean Taylor lost his life. And we have an article here from the Washington Post. And I would think that if you get any sort of introduction to the murder of Sean Taylor, you would probably hear something like the way the Washington Post has laid it out here. November 27th, 2007. Miami-Dade police launched a wide-ranging homicide investigation Tuesday into the death of Washington Redskins safety Sean Taylor, who died at Jackson Memorial Hospital in Miami early in the morning after being shot in the upper thigh while confronting an intruder in his home. Police said they were trying to determine whether a burglary at Taylor's house just over a week ago was related to what they described as a possible home invasion Monday, and whether Taylor was a random victim or targeted by the shooter. We're going to look at everything, Miami-Dade police spokesman Robert Williams said. And that's, I think, is what most people would say if you just ask, a random football fan to give you a kind of a synopsis of what happened with Sean Taylor. Yes, of course, he was killed during a botched home invasion. And they really discussed this a lot in his special on A Football Life by NFL Films. Those things are absolutely great. We also talked about the Steve McNair one when we did our upload on him on this channel. I think that those things are just very well packaged. And it's not only NFL Films, it's not only A Football Life, just a lot of the sports documentaries and presentations. Somebody asked me back in 2018, it was around New Year's Eve, I think, and they were like, what was the best film that you saw for the year? Like for the whole year of 2018. And I said, it was a documentary called Hawk about the commentator and baseball player Hawk Harrelson. Because when it comes to sports films, they really package them in a very, very entertaining and attractive way. The music, all the different interview segments, they connect with so many people who had firsthand connections to the material, and Sean Taylor's is no exception. I mean, of course, you're going to be hearing from people like Dan Snyder, the owner of the Redskins, whom most people despise, but then you're also just going to be hearing from people like Ed Reed saying that Sean Taylor would have gone on to perhaps be one of the best safeties of all time. You're hearing from longtime friend Clinton Portis, also a Miami University graduate. So you're hearing these very, very strong pieces of story that come from firsthand connections, as well as the family members. It's a really big platform for the family members to get to voice their feelings in a tasteful way, in a way that is not exploited. And what I really thought about this case is Sean Taylor was somebody that I didn't really come to know as an NFL personality. And when you're watching A Football Life about him, they say that's what he wanted. That's absolutely designed. Most people didn't know Sean Taylor as a football personality. He didn't really like talking to the media. He didn't like putting on a show. But he was a great performer on the field. And even just when you're seeing him get 181 tackles in a season, that's not an easy thing to do. And, the real thing with Sean Taylor is they said he had a knack for playmaking and a knack for being a major playmaker. Absolutely. just the amount of ferocity that he had once he would pick up the ball. Some people will just kind of like fall on the ball and then, all right, it's down. No, he would just pick up the fumble, the interception, and just keep going with it until they had to drag him down by force. Absolutely an excellent football player. But when it comes to the death of Sean Taylor, we're going to be jumping over to an article from ESPN in 2008. And this is going to be discussing some more of the things that are surrounding the trial and the proceedings and just the arrests. So ESPN 2008, they say, one of 5 suspects charged in the slaying of Washington Redskins safety Sean Taylor has pled guilty to charges of second-degree murder and burglary. Defense attorney Michael Hornung said Thursday that according to the plea agreement, Venja Hunte will serve 29 years in prison and cooperate with prosecutors. Hunte pled guilty on Friday, but prosecutors requested the plea agreement be sealed because investigators are pursuing a 5th suspect, 16-year-old Timothy Brown. And there you see, though, 5 people were involved with this. And the way that this kind of goes down is, if I've got this, Sean Taylor had hired some individuals to come over and clean his pool, and he paid them in cash, and they witnessed that he was passing around lots of money to friends and family members, and he would distribute the money in bags, and they began to think that this was a very big opportunity for a heist. There was an attempted burglary at Sean Taylor's home in Florida, and it was unsuccessful. So then the next week, Sean Taylor flew back to Florida from Virginia, from the Washington area, and he was injured at that time, so it was a very opportune moment to come back down to Florida. He was also known to do this regularly, just to spend time at home. Lots of professional athletes do that, and even in pro wrestling, we said some of this stuff during the Chris Benoit uploads, like, if you have an opportunity to spend the day with your family, the night with your family, the night in your own bed, you're going to do it even if you have to drive 300 miles. He wanted to be back at home, especially when you hear something like a home invasion was going on. Then, the next week later, people are coming back for another attempted robbery. But this time, Sean Taylor is at the home, and they didn't expect him to be there. They thought that he still would have been up in Virginia, and that's when the events really took place that led to his death. There were 5 home invaders, 5 perpetrators were involved with this, as well as some other accomplices. But the people that were charged with the murder charges are Eric Rivera, who was 17 at the time, Charles Wardlow, 18, Jason Mitchell, 19, and Venja Hunte, we mentioned him, who got 29 years, and as well as the other individual that we just said, Timothy Brown, who was 16 years old at the time. The gunman in this one was Eric Rivera, who was only 17 years old, and they say that the reason that they fired the gun in the first place was that they were just very startled that Sean Taylor was at his home, and Sean was actually going to his room to grab a machete that he used for protection during the home invasion. 2 shots were fired by Eric Rivera. One went into the wall, and the other one went into Sean's thigh and into his leg. And at this point, it's like, I mean, it's just almost heartbreaking to hear when they were talking about this during the Football Life from NFL Films. If it had gone a millimeter higher, lower, or in any direction, he probably would have lived. And I was just like, wow, life is a mystery. And I don't mean that in the Hindu sense, the biggest mystery is mankind to himself. Life's a mystery because you never know what's going to happen. You know, you never know what's going to happen. When's your time going to come? And that's what happened with the death of Sean Taylor. And that's what really took the NFL by storm. That's what affected all these players and their family members. And you got this guy who spent a lot of his life training. His fiance at the time said very clearly he slept on an NFL pillow his entire life. This was his dream. His father helped him train from birth pretty much, even doing some things like running up and down alongside the highways at night. He wanted to be an NFL player, and he was an amazing athlete. And you would think that that's just where the story's going to end. That's just where this is going to end. Like, all right, then he's going to go on to have an amazing NFL career. But you never know when your time is going to come. And I think that's what really resonated with a lot of people in the NFL at the time. And when you're listening to this stuff in retrospect, they're just like, They were shocked. The Redskins lost their teammate. The fans lost one of their favorite players. The family members lost their son and brother and boyfriend. And a little girl lost her father. And they actually say, though, that becoming a father was something that really helped Sean Taylor mellow out a little bit and develop a greater sense of tranquility. Now, when I was watching the special on him, I was almost thinking that he was somebody who was, I wanted to describe him as a wildcat. That might be cliche, that might be tacky, but he seemed like a wildcat. He was just someone who would do things his way. You know, he's the kind of guy that's going to put tape all over his face mask, even though he knows he's going to get fined for it. And he just didn't really seem like he liked to be told what to do or to go along with things like giving little quotes to the media. It seemed like he was not interested in all of that. He wanted to be himself, but he also wanted to be a major playmaker on the field. But once his daughter was born, that really allowed him to, it just gave him a greater sense of tranquility in life. That was my takeaway from that anyway. But this motivation, I mean, the motivation for this was greed, absolutely. But the lawyer and spokesperson for the Taylor family, Richard Sharpstein, was really just like, this was not only about greed. This was a series of career criminals. They were very young. Eric Rivera was only 17 when he fired the shots that killed Sean Taylor. He was only 17. That's the reason why none of the defendants had to face the death penalty. But the thing is, though, they were career criminals already. And some of the things that we find that surrounded them. Mitchell had been arrested twice recently in October on charges of driving with a suspended license in violation of probation. Eric Rivera was arrested in October of that year for trafficking cocaine and methamphetamine, and he was previously behind bars for altering the identification number on a firearm. That's from ESPN in a different article. They have many articles in ESPN, and we also cited ESPN a lot during the discussions on Steve McNair and Fred Lane. They're real, of course, covering the sports news, and they're putting out a lot of very good details about this to just make it available to the general public, perhaps more so than some of the things like the Washington Post that we read in the beginning, and the New York Times as well. But the thing is, though, with that, I mean, these people were career criminals. Some of them might have been 17 or 18 years old, even Timothy Brown at age 16. They were on track for destruction. And you know, it's like Sean Taylor was someone who cheated death once. He got into an altercation. Someone pulled a gun on him, tried to fire a shot at his head, but the gun jammed, and he was able to get away with that. He escaped once, but he wasn't able to escape this time. And some people are just at the epicenter of risky behavior. And it doesn't mean anything about their life choices. It's just the people that come around them are bringing destruction toward them. Because as you see here, this wasn't like, these weren't friends. These weren't acquaintances. I mean, someone had been coming over to clean the pool, and then they learned about Bunny, so they orchestrated this heist. But once you see, though, the charges for Rivera, trafficking cocaine and methamphetamine, as well as the firearms charge, he was involved with a host of illegal activities, and it was only a matter of time, so we would think anyway, until he would do something much more heinous. Granted, it was like the startling presence of Sean Taylor in his house that most likely led to them firing the gun that caused his death. And in reality, the reason why we were saying that stuff about, life being a mystery, it's highly unlikely that he actually knew what he was doing. It's highly unlikely that he was actually trying to give a fatal shot to Sean Taylor, because one of the other shots went in the wall. This guy isn't some expert marksman. He probably saw Sean Taylor and fired the gun in a panicked state out of fear for getting caught, and then that led to his death. But yes, within days, these people were arrested, the people that we were talking about, all of the defendants, Rivera, Wardlow, Mitchell, Hunte, and it wasn't until later on that Timothy Brown, the 16-year-old, was arrested. He was arrested in the spring of 2008. And just to read off another quote from Richard Sharpstein, once again, the lawyer and spokesperson for the Taylor family, "The family is thankful that the investigation continues and that all individuals responsible for Sean's death meet harsh justice. And that's the response that they have. Of course, they lost their father, son, brother, boyfriend. Many people were robbed from his life. I mean, his life was taken away from many people, rather. And they wanted them to meet a sense of harsh justice because it was done for greed, but it was also done by a bunch of career criminals that were out of control. And if they didn't get caught at this time, they probably would have gone on to commit many more heinous activities. And it's absolutely despicable. And it really is, though. But at the same time, though, when Richard Sharpstein's making these comments, he also goes on to say some other things in the ESPN articles that the family isn't really feeling any sense of security when these people were arrested. They were not feeling any sort of relief when the perpetrators were arrested because they were still grieving. They hadn't completely processed the loss of their son and family member. They were still grieving, and that did not really bring the closure. But harsh justice is right. And when you see something like Kunte getting 29 years in prison, that's a rather light sentence. And one thing we do need to note is they were all initially charged with unpremeditated second-degree murder, and then the charges were changed to first-degree murder. When it comes to murder charges, murder you have to prove intent. Well, what was the intent when they're firing a gun at somebody? I mean, we get caught up with this a lot when we're talking about just certain actions. I mean, sometimes the defense want to be like, well, there was no intent. I mean, if you're going to deal with those things like somebody punches someone in the face and then they fall back and hit their head on the ground, well, what was the intent when you were punching them in the face? Is it to hurt them? Or you have to bear all responsibility for the consequences of your destructive actions. Even something like that, punching somebody in the face, they fall, they hit their head on the ground, that can still be charged as murder. If you do something that causes somebody's death and that was an intentional action, that most likely will lead to murder. So unpremeditated, I can kind of comprehend that because it's a home invasion. They were trying to steal money. They're trying to get into a safe, most likely, which is wrong, absolutely wrong. But I think all parties are in agreement that they didn't go there specifically to target Sean Taylor, to kill Sean Taylor, to kill anyone. But at the same time, Eric Rivera fired the shot that took his life. Absolutely, they should be charged with murder. And, it's like, I mean, this really just brings up the concept and the question of rehabilitation. Like, what do you do with people who are in this destructive state? And many a times the answer is just lock them up and throw away the key. Unless they can go through some serious process of rehabilitation, I would hope that somebody like Kunte would come out after 29 years and never commit another illegal action. But only time will tell for that. I mean, I do believe in the process of rehabilitation. It doesn't always sound like it when I talk about it on this channel, but I do believe in the process of rehabilitation. It's just that people need harsh sentences when they commit harsh actions. When they commit these types of atrocities, the family is right. They needed to face some harsh consequences. All right, well, thank you for listening to our discussion on the death of Sean Taylor and the circumstances surrounding his murder, as well as a few features of his NFL career, as well as his collegiate and high school career. Excellent football player, taken before his time. I would invite anyone who has been listening this far to check out our uploads on Steve McNair, Fred Lane, as well as the ones we've done on racism in sports, as well as sports conspiracies, if you're just want to hear some different takes on some of the events that surround the sports world that are not talked about as frequently these days. And they may have been mentioned a little bit more around closer to the time of the actions, but we have not forgotten. And that's the way we have to approach these things. I will always remember Reggie Miller. I mean, he said this recently about Kobe Bryant after he passed away. We have to mourn the loss, but we also have to celebrate him. And you can say the same thing about Sean Taylor. You got to mourn the loss, but now, in 2020, we're into a new decade, and it's been many years since the passing of Sean Taylor. We also have to celebrate the good things that he did on the field. Well, that's all for me now. If you have any comments and questions that you'd like to drop in the comment section below, I would love to hear from you. If you like this upload, you can hit the like button, but most importantly, drop some comments below so we can continue the discussion, and check out the description box for some links. That's all for me. Until next time.